Now, for how they move, there's four types of locomotion. There's serpentine that you see in the second one, the green snake, or lateral progression where they undulate or slither, and all your water snakes use this. Then there's rectilinear, which is what you see at the bottom, where it moves like a caterpillar or an inchworm, where they move the skin of the belly forward and then pull the rest of the body. Sidewinding is another type, and if I go back, that's the third one there, where they will do a sideways looping motion, and those that live in the deserts where there's a lot of loose sand will do that. And another type is concertina, where that's the top one, and that's where the body bunches up and it forms horizontal loops, and then the head moves forward and the body straightens like a spring. As we've said several times, they have scaly skin to protect them from abrasion and dehydration. The scales on the top and the sides are smaller and thinner than those on the belly. The ones on the belly are thick and large, and they call them scutes, and that's because they've got to protect and support the tissues as they rub along the ground. And they can be very colorful, but as far as males and females, you can't really tell by looking at them which one's a male or a female by their coloring. They're not slimy at all. They're very dry. They only have two skin glands. They have a pair of anal scent glands that they use when they want to attract a mate or mark their territory. And then snakes continue to die, continue to grow until they die. So they have to shed their skin periodically, ecdysis. And before they shed their skin, they become kind of bluish and their eyes get cloudy because there's fluid between the layers of the skin. And if they have mites or malnutrition or trauma, they can have dysecdysis or abnormal shedding. The skin is usually shed in one piece, including the eye cover that's called the brill. And if the snake has a rattle, that's an exception because it doesn't always lose the rattle. However, the rattle does not indicate the age of the snake because most snakes shed more than once a year. Their digestive system has an esophagus, a stomach, a small intestine, a colon, and some glands. The esophagus doesn't have much muscle. The food goes into the stomach because they move their whole body. The stomach has some folds in it to increase the surface area. The small intestine also has folds and loops. This is where it absorbs nutrients and transports what's not absorbed into the colon or the large intestine. And then the colon carries the fecal matter to the cloacal opening. And remember, the cloaca is a common chamber, and reproductive, urinary, and digestive products are released from the cloaca. Now the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas are a lot like ours. Their liver makes bile like ours does. Their gallbladder stores it and then sends it to the small intestine when needed like ours does. And their pancreas sends digestive enzymes to the small intestines and hormones to regulate blood sugar just like ours does. They breathe using lungs. But the lung ventilation is different with each reptile group. In the squamates, the axial musculature ventilates the lungs. That's the same musculature they use when they move. So they have to hold their breath when they're moving or running. Varanids and some of the lizard species use buccal pumping to help with normal axial breathing. That helps them to fill their lungs completely when they're moving rapidly and remain aerobically active for a long time. Crocodiles have a muscular diaphragm that's pretty much like the mammal diaphragm. The difference is that the way it moves, it pulls the pubis, which is part of the pelvis, back, and that brings the liver down, so there's more space for the lungs to expand, and that's referred to as hepatic piston. Turtles and tortoises have a more difficult time breathing because their shell is rigid, so they don't have a lot of room for expansion and contraction to ventilate their lungs. The lungs are attached to the top inside of the shell, the carapace, and the bottom of the lungs are attached to the rest of the viscera. So they use these special muscles to push the viscera down and up. And sometimes they actually are pushed out of the limb pockets. We see a lot of differences in breathing and locomotion. Adult female green sea turtles can't breathe when they are moving around on the nesting beaches. They have to rest to breathe. The North American box turtles breathe constantly when they're moving, and it's coordinated with their limb movements. And they have even been known to breathe when they are completely sealed up inside their shells. The last species they studied is called red-eared sliders, and they breathe during locomotion, but they take smaller breaths when they're moving, and they pause. So there's a little bit of, they're not getting as good a breath when they're moving there. Most reptiles don't have a secondary palate, which means that they hold their breath when they swallow. But crocodiles do have a bony secondary palate, so they can breathe when they're submerged. Skinks, which are in the family Skinksidae, have a bony secondary palate. And snakes extended their trachea, and so they can swallow large prey without being asphyxiated.